In the shadowed grandeur of Elcott Manor, nestled amid the misty English countryside of 1932, the air hung heavy with the scent of aged oak and blooming roses. Baroness Victoria Elcott, resplendent in her emerald gown, raised her crystal goblet to toast the assembled guests at the lavish dinner party. "To eternal alliances," she declared, her voice a silken thread. As the ruby wine touched her lips, a subtle tremor crossed her face. Moments later, she crumpled to the floor, her body convulsing in agony. Whispers erupted into chaos. Was it accident or murder? The Baroness was dead, poisoned by her own vintage. And among the horrified onlookers, one soul concealed a deadly secret. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. Elcott Manor stood like a sentinel against the rolling mists of the Sussex countryside, its ivy-clad towers piercing the twilight sky of November 1932. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading roses, a fitting backdrop for the opulence within. Inside, the grand dining hall shimmered under the glow of a crystal chandelier, its prisms casting fractured rainbows across polished mahogany and silver. The table, draped in crisp damask, groaned under the weight of fine china, gleaming cutlery, and towering arrangements of hothouse lilies. It was a scene of aristocratic splendor, yet beneath the surface an undercurrent of unease rippled through the room, as if the very walls sensed the storm brewing among the guests. Baron Rupert Elcott, a man of 50 with a mustache as sharp as his temper, stood at the head of the table, his broad shoulders squared in a tailored dinner jacket. His eyes, a cold slate gray, scanned the assembled company with a mixture of obligation and disdain. His wife, Baroness Victoria Elcott, was the evening's true luminary. At 42, she retained a striking beauty. Raven hair swept into an elegant chignon, emerald eyes that missed nothing, and a figure accentuated by a gown of shimmering green silk. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of command, each syllable precise, her wit a blade she wielded with relish. "To our esteemed guests," she began, raising a crystal goblet filled with ruby red wine. "May this with the room's extravagance." But her sharp blue eyes betrayed a mind far from servile. Across the table, Sir Geoffrey Langton, a shipping magnate with a florid complexion and a laugh like a foghorn, dominated conversation with tales of his latest ventures, though his rivalry with the Elcott's business interests was no secret. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the earnest, soldier-turned-companion, adjusted his tie nervously, glancing at his friend, the renowned Belgian detective Hercule Poirot. Poirot himself was a study in understated elegance. His egg-shaped head tilted slightly as he observed the room, his green eyes gleaming with the alertness of a cat in a room full of canaries. His mustache, meticulously waxed, quivered as he murmured to Hastings, "Mon ami, there is a tension here, like the air before a thunderstorm. One does not need the little gray cells to sense it." Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic pronouncements, nodded vaguely, his attention drawn to the Baroness's commanding presence. The dinner progressed through courses of consommé, roasted pheasant, and delicate asparagus spears, each dish a testament to the Elcott's wealth. Conversation ebbed and flowed, punctuated by the clink of cutlery and the soft laughter of the well-bred. The Baroness, as always, held court. "Tell me, Sir Geoffrey," she said, her tone teasing yet sharp, "do your ships still flounder under the weight of your ambition?" The table chuckled, but Geoffrey's smile was strained, his hand tightening around his fork. Thorne, meanwhile, leaned closer to the Baroness, whispering something that made her laugh, a sound like silver bells, though it carried an edge that silenced the room for a moment. As dessert was cleared, profiteroles drizzled with chocolate sauce, the Baroness signaled for the evening's pièce de résistance, a bottle of 1890 Bordeaux from her private cellar, a vintage she boasted was unmatched in England. "This," she declared,
Holding the bottle aloft, its dark glass catching the candlelight, is a wine to rival the gods' nectar. A footman, under her watchful eye, uncorked it with ceremony, pouring the crimson liquid into
his fingers brushing her wrist for a pulse that no longer beat. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice steady despite the pandemonium. "She is gone." He leaned closer, inspecting the shattered goblet. A faint scent, sharp and bitter like almonds, clung to the air. Cyanide, unmistakable to a man of Poirot's experience. He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room, taking in the ashen faces of the guests. "This is no accident," he said softly to Hastings. "The murderer is among us." Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard arrived within the hour, his bulldog-like demeanor cutting through the lingering hysteria. "Right then," he barked, his overcoat dripping from the rain outside. "No one leaves this manor until I've got statements from every soul here." His eyes narrowed as he spotted Poirot. "You here, Poirot? Can't say I'm surprised. Trouble follows you like a shadow." Poirot bowed slightly, unruffled. "Monsieur l'Inspecteur, I offer my humble services. This crime, it is most ingenious, non?" Japp grunted, already organizing the guests into the drawing-room for questioning. The Baron, his face a mask of grief and fury, paced like a caged lion. "Victoria handled the wine herself," he insisted. "Who could have done this?" His voice cracked, but Poirot noted the sweat beading on his brow, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. A man in mourning, or a man with something to hide. Reginald Thorne, still pale, adjusted his cufflinks with forced calm. "We were business associates, nothing more," he told Japp, though his eyes darted toward the Baroness's empty chair. A footman, hovering nervously, whispered to Hastings of late-night meetings between Thorne and the Baroness, their voices hushed in the conservatory. Miss Hargrove, meanwhile, stood rigid, her hands twisting her apron. "I served her faithfully for 20 years, she said, her voice low but trembling. "She was demanding, but I'd never harm her." Yet her gaze flickered to the floor, avoiding Poirot's scrutiny. Sir Geoffrey, wiping him,
trembling, pointing to a shattered vial on the pantry floor, its contents evaporated, but the almond-like scent unmistakable. "I found it there," she stammered, "hidden behind the flour sacks." Japp seized it as evidence, his eyes gleaming. "This could be our murder weapon," he declared. But Poirot's brow furrowed. "Too obvious, Inspector. A breadcrumb left for us to follow, perhaps." The guests were confined to the drawing-room, their murmurs a mix of fear and accusation. The Baron's voice rose above the rest, demanding answers. Thorne stared at the fire, his jaw tight. Hargrove clutched a rosary, her lips moving silently. Sir Geoffrey poured himself a brandy, ignoring Japp's glare. Hastings leaned toward Poirot, whispering, "This feels personal, Poirot. Someone hated her enough to risk this spectacle." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Oui, mon ami. Hatred, greed, betrayal, motives abound. But the method, it is precise, calculated. We seek a mind both bold and cunning." As midnight approached, a servant reported a discovery. A note in the Baroness's chamber, tucked beneath a jewelry box. It read in a hurried scrawl, "Your secrets die with you." Unsigned, it sent a chill through the room. Whose hand had penned it? Japp ordered the chamber sealed, but Poirot's attention lingered on the guests' faces, each a mask hiding truths yet to be uncovered. Then, a commotion at the front door. A late arrival, a solicitor named Mr. Carver, claimed he'd been delayed by the storm. Breathless, he blurted, "I saw Mr. Thorne near the cellar earlier today, fiddling with the lock." Thorne's face drained of colour, his protest drowned by the gasps of the others. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Aha," he said softly. "The plot thickens. But is this truth, or another thread in the web of deception?" The night stretched on, the manor's grandeur now a gilded cage. Poirot stood by the window, gazing into the storm, his little grey cells alight. The poisoned wine, the shattered vial, the cryptic note, the accused financier, all pieces of a puzzle that promised more revelations. And as thunder rumbled in the distance,
Scanning each guest, as if peeling back their facades to reveal the truths beneath. Inspector Japp, his overcoat discarded, but his authority undiminished, paced before the group, his notebook in hand. "Right then," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We've a murder on our hands, and no one leaves until I've got answers. Statements, alibis, the lot." His gaze flicked to Poirot, who offered a slight bow. "Monsieur l'inspecteur, permit me to assist," Poirot said, his Belgian accent softening the words but not their weight. "The method of this crime is most curious, no? A poison so swift, delivered in full view of all, c'est magnifique in its audacity." Japp grunted, unimpressed by Poirot's theatrics, but accustomed to his brilliance. "Curious or not, we've got a shattered vial from the pantry. Smells of cyanide, matches the scent on the Baroness's glass. That's our starting point." He held up the evidence bag containing the broken vial, its jagged edges glinting. Miss Lydia Hargrove, who had discovered it, shrank back, her face pale. "I only found it, sir," she whispered, her hands twisting her apron. "I wasn't looking for trouble." Poirot's mustache twitched as he stepped forward, his polished shoes silent on the Aubusson rug. "Mademoiselle Hargrove, you say you found this vial behind the flour sacks, and no one else was in the pantry?" She nodded, her eyes darting to the Baron, then away. "No one, sir. I was fetching sugar for the coffee when I saw it." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the tremor in her voice, the way her fingers clutched the rosary beads tucked into her pocket. The interviews began in earnest. Baron Rupert Elcott, seated in a high-backed chair like a deposed king, was the first. His broad face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot. "Victoria handled the wine herself," he said, his voice hoarse. "She was particular about that Bordeaux, her pride and joy. We were estranged, yes, but I'd never harm her." Japp raised an eyebrow. "Estranged, you say? Can't you elaborate?" The Baron meetings in the conservatory, of Thorne's hand lingering too long on the Baroness's arm. Poirot filed this away, his mind already tracing the threads of jealousy or betrayal. Miss Hargrove, when questioned, stood rigid, her grey dress blending into the shadows. "I served the Baroness for 20 years, she said, her voice low but laced with bitterness. She was demanding, cruel even. Once she dismissed my sister without a reference over a spilled tray. But I'd never." Her words trailed off, her eyes dropping to the floor. Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle but probing. "And yet, mademoiselle, you found the vial. You were in the pantry, close to the wine. You polished the glasses, no?" Hargrove's head snapped up, her cheeks flushing. "I did my duties, sir, nothing more." Poirot nodded, but his eyes gleamed with suspicion. Sir Geoffrey Langton, sprawled in an armchair with a brandy in hand, dismissed the accusations with a booming laugh. "Me? Poison a woman over a few lost contracts? Absurd! I was chatting with Captain Hastings when the wine was poured. Ask him." Hastings nodded reluctantly, confirming Geoffrey's presence at the table's far end. But Poirot noted the shipping magnate's casual dismissal of the Baroness's business manoeuvres. She had undercut his deals, costing him millions. A man of his pride might not take kindly to such losses. As the interrogations continued, Poirot paced the room, his mind a whirl of details. The wine, poured from a single bottle, had been clean. Tests would later confirm it. The poison, then, was in the Baroness's goblet, a faint, powdery residue clinging to its rim. Cyanide, fast-acting and deadly, required precise delivery. The glass, Poirot murmured to Hastings. It was coated, perhaps, with a substance that dissolved in the wine. But who had access? Who handled it before the toast? Hastings frowned. The servants poured, but Hargrove was in charge of the glassware, and the Baroness herself chose her goblet, a favourite, she said. The note found in the Baroness's chamber, "Your secrets die."
Carver, flustered, produced a key he claimed to have found near the cellar door. Japp seized it, but Poirot's gaze lingered on Carver. "Monsieur, you arrive most conveniently with accusations. Why?" As the clock struck 1, the manor's atmosphere grew oppressive, the storm's howl mingling with the guests' whispered accusations. The Baron glared at Thorne, who stared defiantly back. Hargrove clutched her rosary tighter, her lips moving silently. Sir Geoffrey drained his brandy, his laughter gone. Hastings, ever loyal, leaned toward Poirot. "This is a tangled mess, old chap. Everyone's got a reason to hate her, but who dare?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Dare, mon ami? The killer dared much. This is no crime of passion. It is calculated, precise. We must look beyond the obvious." Poirot requested a tour of the crime scene, and Japp reluctantly agreed. The dining hall, now empty save for police markers, felt like a stage after the curtain's fall. The sideboard held the Bordeaux bottle, its seal unbroken until the Baroness's command. The goblets, collected as evidence, were being dusted for prints, but Poirot's attention lingered on the Baroness's chair, where a single emerald earring lay forgotten. "Hers?" he asked a servant, who nodded. "She wore them tonight." Poirot pocketed it, his mind turning. Had she struggled, dislodging it, or was it placed there? Back in the drawing room, Japp's men reported a new find, a ledger in the Baron's study, detailing massive gambling debts, hundreds of thousands, enough to bankrupt the estate. The Baroness's fortune, inherited from her French vineyards, was the only lifeline. "Explains why he stayed with her," Japp muttered. "But enough to kill?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps, Inspector, but we must also consider alliances. Who else benefits?" Thorne, questioned again, admitted to financial dealings with the Baroness. "She promised to fund my next venture," he said, his voice tight, "but she was unpredictable." A servant's whisper suggested more. The Baroness had threatened to withdraw her support, leaving Thorne desperate. Hargrove, meanwhile, revealed a grudge deeper than her sister
meant for one. But the vial, the note, the key, these are threads in a tapestry of deception. We are close, but not yet there. His eyes met each suspect's, searching for a flinch, a tell. Then, a crash from upstairs, a window shattering in the storm, or something more sinister? The guests froze, Japp barking orders to check. Poirot, however, smiled faintly. "The killer grows restless," he whispered to Hastings. "And we, mon ami, are only beginning." Whispers from the past. The first light of dawn crept through the heavy drapes of Elcott Manor, casting a pale glow over the Sussex countryside, where mist clung to the rolling hills like a shroud. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, the grandeur of the manor now a gilded cage for its occupants. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Japp had reconvened after a sleepless night, buzzed with the low hum of tension. The Baroness Victoria Elcott's poisoned death lingered in every glance, every whispered word,
as the guests, now suspects, awaited the next turn in this grim drama. The shattered vial, the cryptic note, and the accusation against Reginald Thorne hung like storm clouds, promising more revelations. Poirot, his egg-shaped head tilted thoughtfully, stood by the fireplace, his fingers tracing the waxed tips of his mustache. His green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, darted between the suspects seated stiffly on velvet settees and leather armchairs. "Mon ami Hastings," he murmured, his voice low enough to escape Inspector Japp's notice. "We must dig deeper. The Baroness was no mere victim. She was a woman of secrets, and secrets, they breed enemies." Hastings, his face etched with fatigue, nodded. "She was formidable, Poirot, but who hated her enough to risk this spectacle?" Japp, pacing with his notebook, was less philosophical. "We've got the vial, the note, and Carver's claim about Thorne tampering with the cellar. That's enough to start pinning tails, Poirot." He jabbed.
Death. That's how she came to wealth. His voice faltered, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Untimely, you say? How so?" The Baron shrugged, his eyes darting to the window. "An accident," they said. "A fall from a cliff." She never spoke of it. Poirot's mustache twitched. "A coincidence, perhaps, that death follows her fortune?" The room stirred, guests exchanging glances. Japp scribbled furiously. "Right, we'll look into that. Any other family secrets?" The Baron shook his head, but Poirot noted the sweat on his brow, the way his fingers gripped the armrests. Debts, estrangement, and now a questionable inheritance, motive piled upon motive. Poirot turned to Reginald Thorne, whose charm had frayed under the night's strain. "Monsieur Thorne, you were close to the Baroness, oui? Business associates, you claim, yet whispers suggest more." Thorne's jaw tightened, his hands smoothing his tuxedo as if to steady himself. "She was persuasive," he admitted, his voice low. "We were involved, yes, for a time. She promised to leave Rupert, to join me, but lately she grew distant, spoke of returning to France." His eyes darkened. "I loved her, but I'd never kill her." Poirot tilted his head. "Love spurned, monsieur, is a dangerous thing. And her withdrawal, did it threaten your plans?" Thorne's silence spoke volumes. A maid, hovering near the door, whispered to Hastings that the Baroness had been seen arguing with Thorne in the garden days before, her voice sharp with accusations of betrayal. Poirot filed this away, his mind weaving threads of jealousy and desperation. Miss Lydia Hargrove, summoned next, stood with her hands clasped, her gray dress blending into the shadows. Her face, lined with years of service, was a mask of restraint, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of defiance. "I served her faithfully," she said, her voice steady but cold. "She was cruel, beat me once for a broken vase, mocked my loyalty. But I'd never stoop to murder." Poirot leaned closer, his voice soft but piercing. "And yet, mademoiselle, you found the vial. You handled the
Forced. Just cigars, man. Ask the staff." Poirot's attention returned to the physical evidence. The vial from the pantry, reeking of cyanide, matched bottles in the Baroness's medicine cabinet, used, she'd claimed, for tonics. Fingerprints were smudged, unreadable. The wine bottle, tested by Japp's men, was clean, confirming Poirot's theory. The poison was in the goblet, likely a coating that dissolved upon contact with liquid. "A clever method," Poirot murmured to Hastings. The killer needed only a moment to apply it, unseen. Hastings frowned. But who? Hargrove polished the glasses, but the Baroness chose her own goblet, and the servants swear no one touched it after. The note,
Your secrets die with you, gnawed at Poirot. He examined it again, noting the hurried script, the fresh ink. It was placed to distract, he told Japp. But from what? And by whom? Japp, frustrated, ordered a search of the guests' rooms. In Thorne's luggage, they found a locked diary, its pages detailing financial dealings with the Baroness, and a cryptic entry. She knows too much. Must act. Thorne protested, claiming it referred to a business rival, not murder. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Truth or another breadcrumb, monsieur? As the morning wore on, Poirot requested a private word with Hastings in the library, its shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes and the scent of old paper. The Baroness's past, he said, pacing. It is a shadow over this crime. Her uncle's death, her wealth, her enemies, all connect. We must learn more. Hastings nodded, though his eyes were heavy. And the suspects, Poirot. They're all hiding something. Poirot smiled faintly. Oui, mon ami. The Baron conceals his desperation, Thorne his heart, Hargrove her hatred, Geoffrey his pride. But which wove this deadly tapestry? Japp's men returned with a new find. A ledger in the Baroness's study, hidden behind a fold. Dangerous. As noon approached, the manor's clocks chimed, their echoes mingling with the storm's dying gasps. Poirot gathered the suspects in the drawing room, his presence commanding silence. Mes amis, he began, the Baroness was poisoned by a hand both bold and cunning. The goblet, coated with cyanide, was her doom. The vial, the note, these are pieces, but not the whole. We are close, yet the truth hides in the shadows of the past. Then, a shout from the gardens shattered the moment. Rushing outside, they found Sir Geoffrey slumped on a stone bench, a pistol in his hand, blood pooling beneath him. A note, clutched in his fingers, read, I can't bear the guilt. Japp seized it, declaring, Suicide! He's our man! Confessed to the poisoning! But Poirot knelt beside the body, his fingers brushing the wound. No, Inspector. The angle, left-sided, yet he was right-handed. This is no suicide. It is murder, staged to deceive. The guests gasped, Thorne paling, Hargrove trembling, the Baron frozen. Poirot rose, his voice low but resonant. The killer strikes again, to silence or to mislead. But Hercule Poirot will not be fooled. As the wind howled, carrying the scent of rain and secrets, the manor seemed to close in, its walls whispering of truths yet to be uncovered. Chapter 4. The False Trail. The gunshot's echo lingered in the damp air of Elcott Manor's gardens, a grim punctuation to the unfolding tragedy. Dawn's pale light had given way to a gray, oppressive morning, the mist curling around the estate's ancient oaks like ghostly fingers. Sir Geoffrey Langton lay slumped on a stone bench, his florid face now ashen, a pistol clutched in his right hand, blood staining the gravel beneath. The note in his left hand, I can't bear the guilt, fluttered in the breeze, its words a stark accusation. Inspector Japp, his boots crunching on the path, declared the case closed. Suicide, plain as day, he said, holding the note aloft. Madness. Reginald Thorne, his tuxedo rumpled from the sleepless night, stared at the body, his jaw tight. Miss Lydia Hargrove clutched her rosary, her lips moving silently, while Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, whispered, This complicates things, Poirot. If Geoffrey didn't kill the Baroness, who did, and why him? Poirot's response was a faint smile. Complications, mon ami, are the path to clarity. The killer weaves a web, but we shall untangle it. Japp's men cordoned off the garden, collecting the pistol and note for analysis. The note's handwriting mimicked Geoffrey's, but the ink was fresh, the paper unweathered despite the night's storm. Forged, Poirot murmured, to point us toward a false conclusion. He turned to the suspects, his gaze piercing. Someone wished us to believe Sir Geoffrey was the poisoner, to close the case. But his death, it opens new questions. Interrogations resumed in the drawing room, the fire's warmth doing little to dispel the chill of fear. The Baron, his composure fraying, seemed almost relieved. Geoffrey was volatile, he said, his voice hoarse, always shouting about lost contracts. If he didn't do it, why this? Poirot tilted his head. Why indeed, monsieur? Perhaps because he knew too much, or because his death serves another's purpose. The Baron's eyes widened, but he said nothing, his hands trembling. Thorne questioned next, pointed a finger at Hargrove. She despised us all, he said, his voice sharp. Always skulking, listening. She found that vial convenient, isn't it? Hargrove's face flushed, her eyes blazing. I served faithfully, she snapped. You, with your secret meetings and lies, don't pin this on me. Her outburst drew gasps, and Poirot noted the venom in her words, the way her gaze lingered on Thorne. A personal grudge, perhaps, beyond her loyalty to the Baroness. Hastings, tasked with searching the manor's records, returned with a bombshell. A copy of the Baroness's will found in her study. It misled. The letter's ink matched the suicide notes, fresh, suggesting recent planting. By whom? As the morning wore on, Japp's men scoured the manor for more evidence. In Thorne's luggage, they found a small decanter, its contents testing positive for cyanide. Got you, Japp growled, advancing on Thorne, who leapt to his feet. It's not mine, he shouted. Someone planted it. Poirot intervened, his voice calm but commanding. Inspector, consider. The decanter is too obvious, placed where you would find it. The killer wishes us to chase Thorne, to divert from the true path. Poirot gathered the suspects in the dining hall, recreating the fatal dinner. Let us revisit the moment, he said, standing where the Baroness had raised her goblet. The wine was clean, but the goblet, coated with cyanide, dissolving in the liquid. Who had access? He paced, gesturing to the sideboard. The glasses were polished by Mademoiselle Hargrove, set by servants, but the Baroness chose her own, a favorite, engraved with her initials. The poison was applied before the pour. But when? And by whom? Hargrove, trembling, admitted to polishing the glasses alone that afternoon. I left them on the sideboard, she said. Anyone could have touched them. The Baron, questioned, claimed he was in his study, though a footman saw him near the dining hall. Thorne insisted he was in the library, but Carver's accusation lingered. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the timeline. The killer needed only seconds, he said to Hastings. A brush of powder, invisible until the wine's touch. A new discovery shifted the focus. A servant found a glove in the pantry, stained with a powdery residue. Cyanide, Japp confirmed, holding it up. The glove was small, suggesting a woman's hand. Hargrove's? She denied it, her voice rising. I never wore gloves there. Poirot examined it, noting its fine leather, out of place for a maid. Perhaps not yours, mademoiselle, he said, but placed to implicate you. The Baron's ledger, examined further, revealed more. He'd borrowed heavily against the estate, with the Baronet something, or someone, feared he did. Japp's men reported a new lead. A groundskeeper saw the Baron and Hargrove whispering in the conservatory days before, their voices low, urgent. "Plotting?" Japp asked, eyeing them both. The Baron scoffed. "Nonsense. I was discussing household matters." Hargrove nodded, but her hands shook. Poirot filed this away, suspecting an alliance. The suicide note's ink matched a pen in the Baron's study, but fingerprints were absent, suggesting care. "The killer is meticulous," Poirot told Japp. "They stage, they plant, they deceive." He requested a test of Geoffrey's blood. Had he been drugged before the shot? The answer would take hours, but Poirot's suspicion grew. A second murder to cover the first. As evening fell, the manor's clocks chimed 6, their echoes haunting. Poirot gathered the suspects, his voice resonant. "Mes amis, the web tightens. Sir Geoffrey's death is no confession. It is a desperate act to mislead. The poisoner, the murderer, they are one, and they are among us." His eyes met each suspect's. The Baron's defiance, Thorne's fear, Hargrove's trembling resolve. Then a cry from the cellar. A servant had found a hidden trapdoor, its lock freshly broken. Poirot's heart quickened. "Aha!" he whispered to Hastings. "The killer grows careless, or desperate." As Japp's men rushed to investigate, the manor seemed to hold its breath, its secrets teetering on the edge of revelation.
Chapter 5. Hidden Alliances. The twilight deepened over Elcott Manor, its towers looming like silent sentinels against the fading light of November 1932. The storm had quieted, leaving a damp chill that seeped into the bones of the manor's inhabitants, now gathered once more in the drawing room. The discovery of Sir Geoffrey Langton's staged suicide in the garden had shattered any illusion of resolution, and the cry from the cellar, a trapdoor, its lock freshly broken, hung like a spectre over the proceedings. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, stood before the fireplace, his green eyes glinting as they swept over the suspects. The air was thick with suspicion, each glance a silent accusation, each word weighed for hidden meaning. Inspector Japp, his notebook worn from constant use, barked orders to his men as they secured the cellar for investigation. "A trapdoor, eh? What's this killer hiding now?" he muttered, glancing at Poirot. "Your thoughts, Poirot? Another red herring?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Perhaps, Inspector. Or perhaps a thread that leads to the heart of this tapestry. The killer is clever, but even the cleverest leave traces." To Captain Hastings hovering at his side, he whispered, "Mon ami, alliances are forming in the shadows. We must uncover them before the next strike." The suspects, Baron Rupert Elcott, Reginald Thorne, and Miss Lydia Hargrove, sat in uneasy silence, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. The Baron, his broad shoulders slumped, stared into the fire, his hands clenched as if grappling with an unseen foe. Thorne, his charm eroded by the night's strain, adjusted his tie with trembling fingers, his eyes darting to the door as if plotting escape. Hargrove, her gray dress blending into the gloom, clutched her rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Or was it guilt? Hastings leaned toward Poirot, his voice low. "They're all on edge, Poirot. Geoffrey's death has them rattled. But who's next?" Poirot's investigation turned to the cellar discovery. Japp's men reported a cramped chamber beneath the trapdoor, its wall glove in the kitchen, the decanter in Thorne's luggage, all pointed to different suspects, yet none felt complete. Sir Geoffrey's murder, staged as suicide, suggested a killer desperate to divert suspicion or silence a witness. "Alliances," Poirot said to Hastings, "are the key. The killer does not act alone, I think. We seek a partnership forged in greed
or vengeance? Interrogations resumed with renewed intensity. The Baron, questioned about the cellar, grew defensive. Victoria kept her precious wines there, he said, his voice bitter. She locked it herself, said I'd squander them. Poirot tilted his head. And yet, monsieur, a groundskeeper saw you near the cellar last week with Mademoiselle Hargrove. What were you discussing? The Baron's face reddened. Household matters. Nothing more. Hargrove, seated nearby, flinched, her eyes dropping to her lap. Poirot noted the exchange, suspecting a connection deeper than servant and master. Thorne, under scrutiny, admitted to a strained relationship with the Baroness. She feared her husband, he said, his voice low, said he was plotting against her, wanted her fortune. I urged her to leave, but she wouldn't. His eyes met Poirot's, pleading. I loved her, despite her games. I'd never harm her. Yet a letter in his room, found earlier, hinted at desperation. She knows too much, must act. When pressed, Thorne claimed it referred to a rival financier, not murder. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And the decanter, monsieur? Planted, you say? But by whom? Hargrove, summoned next, cracked under Poirot's gentle but relentless questioning. I saw the Baron with a vial days ago, she whispered, her voice trembling. In his study. He said it was medicine, but... She trailed off, her eyes darting to the Baron, who glared back. Lies, he shouted. You're trying to save yourself. Poirot stepped between them, his voice calm. Mademoiselle, why did you not speak sooner? And this vial, where is it now? Hargrove shook her head, confronted, paled. I always polished carefully, she said. It was my duty. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, mademoiselle, you chose that goblet for her. Did you know it would be her last? The Baron's study yielded another clue, a hidden ledger detailing loans from Sir Geoffrey, secured against the estate. They were partners, Japp said, flipping through the pages, but the Baroness blocked their deals, costing them both. Could explain why Geoffrey was targeted. Poirot nodded. Oui, but Geoffrey's death serves another purpose, to frame or to silence. We must test his blood for sedatives. If drugged, the killer planned his murder meticulously. As night fell, the manor's clocks chimed 9, their echoes mingling with the creak of ancient beams. Poirot requested a reconstruction of the dinner's setup. In the dining hall, he positioned the suspects as they had been, the Baron at the head, Thorne to his left, Hargrove overseeing the servants, Geoffrey across from Hastings. The goblet, Poirot said, holding a replica, was here, on the sideboard, polished and waiting. The wine was poured here. He mimed the footman's actions, his eyes scanning for reactions. Hargrove's hands shook. The Baron's gaze was fixed on the floor. A maid's testimony added weight. She'd seen Thorne near the sideboard before dinner, adjusting his cufflinks. He was nervous, she said. Thorne protested. I was fixing my sleeve, nothing more. But Poirot's mind turned to opportunity. The killer needed only a moment, he told Japp. A brush of powder, unseen in the bustle. The cellar trapdoor yielded no further clues, but its broken lock suggested recent use. Someone hid something, or retrieved it, Poirot said. He requested a search of the Baron's rooms, where Japp's men found a key matching the cellar lock, tucked in a cigar box. Yours, Baron? Japp demanded. The Baron's face drained of colour. I don't know how it got there, he stammered. Poirot's smile was thin. Someone wishes us to believe you guilty, monsieur. Or perhaps you are. As midnight loomed, Poirot gathered the suspects in the drawer like steel. Thorne's hands shook as he dropped the box, revealing a single key, engraved with the Elcott crest. "I was looking for proof," he stammered. "She gave me this, for safekeeping." The key's purpose was unclear, but its discovery sent a ripple through the group. Japp seized it, barking, "You're in deep, Thorn!" But Poirot's eyes gleamed. Or someone wishes him to be. The game grows desperate. As the manor's clocks struck 12, the air thickened with unspoken truths, and Poirot knew the killer was close to a fatal misstep. Chapter 6. The Turning Point. The midnight hour draped Elcott Manor in a cloak of silence, broken only by the distant creak of floorboards and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The cellar, where Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Japp had cornered Reginald Thorne, was a cavern of shadows, its air heavy with the scent of damp stone and aged wine. Thorne stood frozen, the small box he'd dropped lying open at his feet, revealing a key engraved with the Elcott crest. His face, usually a mask of charm, was pale, his eyes wide with panic. "I was looking for proof," he stammered, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "She gave me this key, for safekeeping." Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the lantern light, sharp and unyielding. "Proof of what, monsieur? And why seek it in the dead of night?" Japp, his patience frayed, seized the key, turning it over in his gloved hand. "This matches the cellar lock," he growled. "You've got some explaining to do, Thorne." But Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm yet commanding. "Patience, Inspector. Monsieur Thorne claims innocence, yet the evidence mounts against him. Let us see where this key leads." He gestured to the trapdoor, its broken lock a silent witness to secrets disturbed. The group ascended to the drawing-room, where the other suspects, Baron Rupert Elcott and Miss Lydia Hargrove, waited under the watchful—
"Monsieur, you did not protect her. You kept this key hidden until now. Why?"
Thorne's eyes darted away, his silence damning. Hastings whispered to Poirot, "He's hiding something. But is it murder?" Japp, less patient, pressed Hargrove next. The maid, her grey dress rumpled from the long night, stood rigid, her hands clutching her rosary. "You were seen with the Baron near the cellar," Japp said, his tone sharp, "and you found that vial. What's your game?" Hargrove's lips trembled. "I saw the Baron with a vial in his study, yes, but I never touched it. I swear I only found the one in the pantry." Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft but probing. "Mademoiselle, you polished the Baroness's goblet. You knew her habits. And you harbored hatred for her cruelties, no?" Hargrove's eyes filled with tears. "I hated her, yes, but I didn't kill her." The documents from the safe painted a clearer picture. The Baron's debts, once merely rumours, were staggering. Hundreds of thousands, secured against the estate. The Baroness's refusal to pay had driven him to desperation, and her new will threatened to leave him penniless. "You had every reason to want her dead," Japp said, advancing on the Baron. "And Geoffrey, did he know too much?" The Baron's face reddened. "I'm no murderer! Geoffrey was my friend!" But Poirot noted his clenched fists, the sweat on his brow. A new lead emerged. A servant reported overhearing the Baron and Sir Geoffrey arguing days before in the conservatory about a failed venture the Baroness had sabotaged. "Geoffrey was furious," the servant said. "Said she'd ruined them both." Poirot's eyes gleamed. And so perhaps Geoffrey became a liability. But who silenced him? The autopsy results,
rushed by Japp's men, confirmed Poirot's suspicion. Geoffrey had been drugged with a sedative before the gunshot, his death staged to mimic suicide. The killer is meticulous, Poirot told Hastings. They drug, they shoot, they forge a note, all to point us to a fault perfectly. As the night wore on, Poirot reconstructed the dinner's timeline in the dining hall, positioning the suspects as they had been. The goblet, he said, holding a replica, was coated with cyanide, a paste that dissolved in the wine. The Baroness chose it herself, but who prepared it? He paced, gesturing to the sideboard. Mademoiselle Hargrove polished it. The Baron was near the dining hall. Monsieur Thorne adjusted his cufflinks nearby. Perhaps a distraction? Thorne protested. I was fixing my sleeve, nothing more. But a maid's testimony lingered. Thorne had lingered near the sideboard, his hands briefly out of sight. A telegram arrived, its contents a shock. The Baroness's French vineyard had faced a similar poisoning years ago. Her uncle's death ruled an accident, but whispered to be murder. A pattern, Poirot said to Hastings, his voice low. The Baroness's wealth came from death, and now death follows her. Coincidence? Hastings frowned. If it's the same killer, they've waited years. Why now? Poirot's smile was grim. Because, mon ami, the stakes are higher. Her will, her fortune, her secrets, all converge. Japp, emboldened by the evidence, prepared to arrest the Baron. Motive, means, opportunity. He's our man, he declared, gesturing to the ledger, the key, the rat poison. But Poirot intervened, his voice sharp. Not yet, Inspector. The little grey cells, they protest. The Baron is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. He turned to the suspects, his gaze piercing. Someone here knows more. Someone who weaves this web of deception. As the clocks chimed 2, Hastings returned from a search of Hargrove's room, his face pale. Poirot, you need to see this. In his hand was a locket, small and silver, tucked beneath Hargrove's mattress. Inside was a photograph of the Baroness, young and radiant, inscribed with a single word, Sister. The room fell silent. Hargrove's gasp audible. How did you, she began, then stopped, her hands covering her face. Poirot's eyes were desperate for wealth, a lover, spurned or framed, and Geoffrey, silenced for what he knew. Japp, frustrated, demanded action. We've got the Baron's debts, Hargrove's grudge, Thorne's key. Pick one, Poirot! But Poirot shook his head. No, Inspector. The truth lies in the connections. The killer or killers work in concert, planting clues to mislead. He turned to the group, his voice resonant. The goblet, the vial, the key, the locket. All threads in a tapestry of deceit. But one thread pulls loose. As dawn's first light crept through the windows, a servant rushed in, breathless. Sir, a letter, in the Baroness's handwriting, found in the library. It read, If I die, look to those closest. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A final clue, mes amis. The Baroness knew her danger. But who was closest? The suspects exchanged glances, fear and suspicion swirling. And then, a faint creak from the hall. Someone listening or fleeing. Poirot's heart quickened. The game turns, he whispered to Hastings. The killer is near, and the truth is nearer still. Chapter 7. Veils of Deception. The faint creak from the hallway of Elkhart Manor lingered like a ghostly whisper, its echo swallowed by the oppressive silence of the pre-dawn hours in November 1932. The drawing room where Hercule Poirot, Captain Arthur Hastings, and Inspector Japp faced the dwindling circle of suspects was a cauldron of tension. The locket found in Miss Lydia Hargrove's room, a silver keepsake bearing the Baroness Victoria Elcott's photograph and the inscription "Sister," had shattered the fragile calm, revealing a hidden bond that cast new shadows over the murder investigation. The Baroness's poisoned death, followed by Sir Geoffrey Langton's staged suicide, had tightened the noose of suspicion. And now the letter in her handwriting, "If I die, look to those closest."
Precision. The killer, or killers, have woven a tapestry of misdirection. The vial, the glove, the decanter, the note. But the locket, it changes all. Hargrove, summoned to explain, stood trembling, her gray dress blending into the shadows. Tears streamed down her lined face as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Victoria was my half-sister, yes. Our father loved her mother, not mine. When he died, she inherited everything, the vineyards, the wealth, and left me nothing. I came to Elkhart Manor to serve, to understand why she abandoned me." Her voice broke. "I hated her, but I didn't kill her. I swear it." Poirot leaned closer, his tone gentle but piercing. "Mademoiselle, you handled the goblet. You knew her habits. Did your hatred guide your hand?" Hargrove shook her head violently. "I polished it, yes, but I didn't poison it." Poirot turned to the Baron, whose eyes burned with defiance. "Monsieur, your wife hid her origins well. Did you know of this sister?" The Baron laughed bitterly, his hands clenching the armrests of his chair. "Victoria was a vault of secrets. She never spoke of family, only wealth. If Lydia's her sister, it explains her bitterness, but not murder." His voice wavered, and Poirot noted the sweat beading on his brow. A man cornered, or merely grieving? Thorne, seated across the room, interjected, his voice sharp. "She never mentioned a sister. Was this another of her games, manipulating us all?" His eyes darted to Hargrove, then away, as if fearing her response. Poirot's gaze lingered on him. "And you, monsieur, stood to gain from her will. A codicil named you beneficiary. Did you know?" Thorne paled, shaking his head. "She never told me. I loved her despite her whims." But a servant's whisper to Hastings suggested otherwise. The Baroness had threatened to cut Thorne out, accusing him of betrayal. The letter found in the library, "If I die, look to those closest," gnawed at Poirot. Its handwriting matched the Baroness's, its ink fresh, suggesting it was written shortly before her death. "A warning," Poirot said to Hastings, "or a trap set by the killer to point us inward." He examined the physical debts. "Her death solves everything." Poirot nodded, but his mind churned. "Oui, but why kill Geoffrey? To silence or to frame?" A new testimony shifted the balance. A footman recalled seeing the Baron and Hargrove whispering in the conservatory days before, their voices low and urgent. "They stopped when I approached," he said, "looked guilty." Poirot confronted the Baron, his voice deceptively mild. "Monsieur, you and Mademoiselle Hargrove, an alliance, perhaps? To rid yourselves of a wife and sister who held you both in chains?" The Baron's face reddened. "Absurd! I barely spoke to the woman." Hargrove, trembling, nodded. "It was about household duties, nothing more." Poirot's investigation turned to the manor's layout. The dining hall where the Baroness died was a stage of opportunity. Hargrove had polished the goblets alone, but the Baroness chose her own, a favourite, engraved with her initials. "The poison was applied before the pour," Poirot said,
pacing the hall with Hastings. A paste, perhaps, invisible until the wine's touch. He gestured to the sideboard. Mademoiselle Hargrove had access, but so did others. The Baron was seen nearby. Monsieur Thorne lingered, adjusting his cufflinks, a distraction, perhaps. A maid's testimony deepened the mystery. She'd seen Thorne near the glasses before dinner, his hands briefly out of sight. "He was nervous," she said. Thorne protested, his voice rising. "I was fixing my sleeve, nothing more. Someone's framing me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And who, monsieur, would do such a thing? The killer, perhaps, who knows your secrets?" The cellar trapdoor, its lock broken, yielded no further clues, but the charred paper, "Debts paid," suggested a cover-up. The Baron's debts, Poirot mused, or another's? The Baroness held power over many. A search of Hargrove's room revealed another find, a ring tucked in a drawer, engraved with the vineyard crest of the Baroness's French estate. Stolen?
Poirot requested a re-examination of the goblet's residue. Tests confirmed cyanide, likely from the manor's rat poison, accessible to all but requiring intimate knowledge to use undetected. "The killer planned meticulously," Poirot told Hastings. "They coated the goblet, knowing her habits, her choice." Hastings frowned. "Hargrove knew her best, but the Baron's desperation, it's palpable." A new lead emerged. A gardener reported seeing Thorne in the garden the night before the dinner, meeting a shadowy figure. "Couldn't see who," he said, "but they were arguing." Thorne denied it, his voice shaking. "I was alone, walking. This is a lie." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, monsieur, lies surround you. The key, the decanter, the meeting, who protects you or betrays you?" The Baroness's letter haunted Poirot. "Those closest," he murmured, "her husband, her lover, her sister, all had reasons to betray." He confronted Hargrove again, holding up the ring. "This crest, mademoiselle, it ties you to her past. Did you seek revenge or something more?" Hargrove sobbed. "I wanted her to acknowledge me, to share what was mine, but I didn't kill her." As dawn broke, casting pale light through the windows, Poirot gathered the suspects in the dining hall, recreating the fatal moment. "The goblet was here," he said, pointing to the sideboard. "Polished, prepared, poisoned. The wine was clean, the killer precise. Who among you had the moment, the motive, the means?" His eyes met each suspect's, the Baron's defiance, Thorne's fear, Hargrove's tears. Then, a faint rustle from the hall, a curtain moving, or a figure retreating. Poirot's heart quickened. "The killer watches," he whispered to Hastings. "They fear the truth is near." As Japp's men rushed to check, the manor seemed to hold its breath, its secrets teetering on the edge of exposure. Chapter 8. The Gathering Clues. The pale dawn light filtered through the heavy drapes of Elcott Manor, casting a ghostly pallor over the drawing-room where Hercule Poirot,
Etched with desperation, Reginald Thorne, his charm eroded by fear, and Hargrove, her hands trembling around her rosary. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice resonant yet measured. "The clues gather, like threads in a tapestry. The Baroness was poisoned by a goblet coated with cyanide, a method precise and intimate. Sir Geoffrey was drugged and shot, his death staged as suicide. The vial, the glove, the decanter, the locket, all point fingers, yet the truth lies in their connections. We are close, but one piece remains." Inspector Japp, his patience thinning, clutched his notebook. "We've got motives aplenty, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff. "The Baron's debts, Hargrove's grudge, Thorne's codicil, and now this sister business. Let's make an arrest and be done." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his amusement. "No, Inspector. Haste obscures the truth. The little grey cells, they demand we see the whole picture." Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the evidence. The Baroness's goblet, coated with cyanide paste, required knowledge of her habits. She always chose her engraved crystal. The vial in the pantry, found by Hargrove, bore her smudged fingerprints, suggesting it was planted or handled carelessly. The glove, too fine for a maid, hinted at a frame. The decanter in Thorne's luggage, the forged note in Geoffrey's hand, the key in the cellar, all were breadcrumbs leading to false conclusions. "The killer is a master of deception," Poirot told Hastings, pacing the room. "They plant clues to divide us, but the murders connect. Geoffrey died because he knew, or was feared to know, too much." Japp's men returned from the hallway, finding only a fallen curtain rod. "No one there," a constable reported, but Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The killer watches, mon ami," he whispered to Hastings. "They fear exposure." He turned to the physical evidence, requesting a re-examination of the goblet's residue. Tests confirmed cyanide from the manor's rat poison.
Poirot leaned closer, his tone gentle but probing. "And the ring, mademoiselle, with the vineyard crest. Why keep it hidden?" Hargrove's lips trembled. "It was mine by right. She took everything else." Poirot noted her bitterness, a motive as potent as the Baron's greed. Thorne, his composure fraying, protested his innocence. "I'm being framed," he said, his voice rising. "The decanter, the key, someone planted them." A maid's testimony lingered. Thorne had been seen near the sideboard, his hands briefly out of sight. "Fixing my cufflinks," he insisted, but Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the meeting in the garden, monsieur? The gardener saw you arguing with a shadowed figure." "Who?" Thorne paled, shaking his head. "I was alone, I swear." The autopsy on Sir Geoffrey provided a critical clue. Traces of chloral hydrate in his blood, confirming he was drugged before the gunshot. The killer sedated him, Poirot told Japp, then staged the suicide. The note's ink matches the Baron's pen, but no fingerprints. Careful work. Japp's eyes narrowed. The Baron again. He had access, motive, everything. Poirot nodded, but his mind churned. Oui, but why Geoffrey? To silence a witness or to shift blame? A new lead emerged. A servant recalled seeing the Baron and Hargrove whispering in the conservatory days before, their voices low and urgent. "They stopped when I approached," the servant said. Poirot confronted them, his voice deceptively mild. "An alliance, perhaps? A shared goal to rid yourselves of a wife and sister?" Hargrove gasped, her hands shaking. "It was about the household budget." The Baron nodded, but his eyes darted away. Poirot filed this away, suspecting a deeper bond. The Baroness's letter, "If I die, look to those closest," gnawed at Poirot. He examined it again, noting its fresh ink, its precise wording. She knew her danger, he told Hastings. But who was closest? Her husband, her lover, her sister, all betrayed her in their way.
"To her wealth, mademoiselle. Did you seek to reclaim it?" Hargrove sobbed. "I wanted her to see me, to share what was ours, not to kill." As morning broke, Poirot reconstructed the dinner's timeline in the dining hall, positioning the suspects as they had been. The goblet was here,
he said, pointing to the sideboard. Polished by Mademoiselle Hargrove, chosen by the Baroness. The poison, applied as a paste, dissolved in the wine. Who had the moment? He gestured to the table. The Baron was near. Monsieur Thorne lingered. Mademoiselle Hargrove prepared. All had opportunity. A gardener's testimony added weight. He'd seen Thorne in the garden, arguing with a figure he couldn't identify. It was dark, he said, but they were heated. Thorne denied it, his voice shaking. I was alone. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, monsieur, the clues pile against you. The key, the decanter, the meeting. Who protects you or betrays you? Japp's men reported a new find. A vial of chloral hydrate in the manor's medicine cabinet. Accessible to all, but requiring knowledge to use. The same sedative in Geoffrey's blood, Japp said. Anyone could have taken it. Poirot nodded. Oui, but the killer knew its purpose. To silence before the shot. As noon approached, the manor's clocks chimed, their echoes haunting. Poirot gathered the suspects, his voice commanding. Mes amis, the clues align. The Baroness was poisoned by a hand that knew her well. Sir Geoffrey was silenced for what he saw, or what the killer feared he saw. The locket, the ring, the letter. These point to an intimate betrayal. His eyes met each suspect's. The Baron's defiance, Thorne's fear, Hargrove's tears. Then, a crash from upstairs shattered the moment. A glass breaking. Or something heavier? Japp's men rushed to investigate, Poirot and Hastings following. In Thorne's room they found a shattered mirror, its frame concealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a single letter, in the Baroness's handwriting. Reginald, you betrayed me. Poirot's heart quickened. The final piece, perhaps, he whispered to Hastings.
The suspects. Baron Rupert Elcott, his face a mask of desperation. Thorne, pale and trembling. And Miss Lydia Hargrove, her hands clutching her rosary as tears streaked her face. The air was thick with the weight of two murders, the Baroness's poisoning, and Sir Geoffrey Langton's staged suicide. And the truth was tantalizingly close. Inspector Japp, his notebook nearly filled, seized the letter from Thorne's room. Reginald, you betrayed me. He read aloud, his voice sharp. Care to explain, Thorne? This looks like motive to me. Thorne's hands shook as he stood, his voice cracking. It's not mine. Someone planted it just like the decanter. His eyes darted to the Baron, then Hargrove, as if seeking the true culprit. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. Patience, Inspector. The letter. It is another thread in this tapestry of deception. We are close to the truth, but we must tread carefully. Poirot's mind churned, weaving together the clues, the Baroness's goblet, coated with cyanide paste, the pantry vial with Hargrove's fingerprints, the fine leather glove, the decanter in Thorne's luggage, the forged suicide note in Geoffrey's hand, the locket revealing Hargrove as the Baroness's half-sister, the ring with the vineyard crest, and now this letter, accusing Thorne. The killer, Poirot told Captain Hastings, whispering as they stood by the fireplace, is desperate. They plant clues to divide us, but the murders connect. The Baroness died for her wealth, Geoffrey for what he knew, or what the killer feared he knew. Japp, impatient, turned to the suspects. We've got enough, he declared. The Baron's debts, Hargrove's grudge, Thorne's betrayal, someone's guilty, and I'm done waiting. Poirot's moustache twitched, his smile faint but resolute. Non, Inspector. The little grey cells, they protest. Let us gather all in the dining hall, where this tragedy began, and unravel the web. The suspects were herded into the dining hall, its grandeur now a grim reminder of the Baroness's final moments. The chandelier cast fractured light across the mahogany. Voice trembled but held firm. I hated her, yes, but I didn't kill her. I wanted her to see me, to share what was mine.
Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to the Baron.
And you, monsieur, faced ruin. Her fortune was your salvation, but her new will threatened to leave you nothing. You were seen near the dining hall, with Mademoiselle Hargrove in secret talks. An alliance, perhaps?
The Baron's face reddened, his fists clenching.
I spoke to her about household matters. My debts were no secret, but murder. Absurd.
His voice cracked, and Poirot noted the sweat on his brow. He turned to Thorn, whose eyes were wide with fear.
Monsieur Thorn, you loved her, oui, but she accused you of betrayal. The codicil named you beneficiary, yet she wavered. The letter, the decanter, planted, you claim. But by whom?
Thorn shook his head.
I'm innocent. Someone's framing me.
Poirot paced, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet.
Let us reconstruct the crime. The goblet was prepared hours before, coated with cyanide paste, invisible until the wine's touch. Mademoiselle Hargrove polished it alone. The Baron was nearby. Monsieur Thorn lingered, adjusting his cufflinks, perhaps a distraction. The wine was clean, poured before all. The poison was in the glass, chosen by the Baroness herself. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. But the killer needed opportunity, motive, and knowledge. Who among you had all three? A servant's testimony resurfaced. The Baron and Hargrove, whispering in the conservatory, had been seen passing a small vial. It was medicine, the Baron insisted, but Hargrove's silence was damning. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Medicine or poison? The vial in the pantry bore Mademoiselle Hargrove's fingerprints. The glove, too fine for a maid, suggests a plant. But whose hand? The autopsy on Geoffrey provided clarity. Chloral hydrate in his blood, matching a vial in the Manor's medicine cabinet. Accessible to all. Geoffrey's murder was a desperate act to silence or mislead. The clues point to an alliance, a shared motive. He turned to Hargrove, holding up the locket. You, mademoiselle, sought revenge for a stolen birthright. The ring, the locket, symbols of your pain. He faced the Baron. You, monsieur, sought her fortune, the ledger, the debts. Your ruin was imminent. He glanced at Thorn. And you, monsieur, were betrayed, perhaps, but innocent. Or so you claim. Hargrove broke, her voice a sob. It was Rupert. He promised me half the estate if I helped. I coated the goblet. He gave me the poison. The Baron roared, lunging forward. Lies! She's mad! Japp's men restrained him, but Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mademoiselle, you confess. Tell all. Hargrove collapsed, weeping. He said she deserved it, ruined us both. I polished the goblet, applied the paste. He distracted the servants. The Baron snarled, his face contorted. She deserved it. She mocked my debts, threatened to leave me nothing. Japp cuffed him, his voice triumphant. Got you both! But Poirot raised a hand, his voice sharp. One moment, Inspector. Monsieur Thorn. What did you know? Thorn paled, his voice barely audible. I suspected. She told me Rupert was desperate. But I said nothing. Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was relentless. The alliance is clear. The Baron and Mademoiselle Hargrove, bound by greed and vengeance. The vial, the glove, the decanter, all planted to frame Monsieur Thorn. Geoffrey was killed because he overheard their plan, confronted them. The Baron drugged him, shot him, staged the suicide. He held up the handkerchief. This, from your study, monsieur, bears traces of chloral hydrate. Careless. Japp's men seized the evidence, the room erupting in gasps. Hargrove sobbed, the Baron cursed, and Thorne sank into a chair. Conspiracy. The dining hall, where Baroness Victoria Elcott had met her poisoned end, was now empty, save for Hercule Poirot, Captain Arthur Hastings, and Inspector Japp, who stood amidst the echoes of the previous night's confrontation. The arrests of Baron Rupert Elcott and Miss Lydia Hargrove had brought the case to a close, yet the air held a lingering heaviness, as if the manor's walls retained the weight of secrets exposed. Poirot, his small frame erect with quiet dignity, surveyed the room, his green eyes reflective. "Mes amis," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "The truth has emerged, but it leaves a bitter taste, no?" Japp, his notebook finally closed, leaned against the mahogany table, his gruff demeanor softened by exhaustion. "We've got them, Poirot," he said, a note of triumph in his voice. "The Baron and Hargrove, motive, means, opportunity, and a confession to boot. Case closed." Hastings, standing by the sideboard where the fatal goblet had rested, nodded but looked uneasy. "It fits, Poirot, but it's so grim. A husband and a sister, plotting together. It's almost too much." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his melancholy. "The human heart, mon ami. It is capable of great darkness. Greed, vengeance, betrayal. These are the poisons that killed the Baroness, as surely as the cyanide." The final confrontation had laid bare the conspiracy. Hargrove's tearful confession, spurred by Poirot's relentless probing, had implicated the Baron as her partner in crime. "He promised me half the estate," she had sobbed, her hands trembling around her rosary. "He said she deserved it. Ruined us both." The Baron, his defiance crumbling, had snarled his own admission. "She mocked my debts, threatened to leave me nothing." Their alliance, forged in shared desperation, had been the key. Hargrove, the wronged half-sister, coated the Baroness's favourite goblet with cyanide paste. The Baron, drowning in gambling debts, distracted the servants and provided the poison. Monsieur Thorne's luggage, the forged note in Sir Geoffrey's hand, these were red herrings, planted to mislead. He turned to the Baron's empty chair, his voice steady. Monsieur le Baron faced ruin. His debts, hundreds of thousands, threatened to bankrupt the estate. The Baroness, his wife, controlled the fortune, inherited from her French vineyards after her uncle's suspicious death. Her new will, cutting him out in favor of charity, was his motive. He enlisted Mademoiselle Hargrove, the Baroness's half-sister, whose hatred stemmed from a stolen birthright. He held up the locket, its silver glinting. This, found in Mademoiselle Hargrove's room, revealed her identity. The ring, engraved with the vineyard crest, confirmed her claim. Together, they plotted. Hargrove prepared the goblet, the Baron ensured the poison's delivery. Poirot paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Sir Geoffrey, their business partner, overheard their whispers in the conservatory. He confronted them, threatening exposure. So the Baron drugged him with chloral hydrate from the manor's medicine cabinet, shot him in the garden, and staged a suicide with a forged note, written with his own pen, but carefully wiped of prints. The handkerchief, embroidered with the Elcott crest, bore traces of the sedative. A careless mistake. Thorne, seated pale and shaken, spoke up, his voice hoarse. I suspected something, Poirot. She told me Rupert was desperate, but I never thought. His words trailed off, guilt etching his face. Poirot nodded, his tone gentle. You, monsieur, were a convenient scapegoat. The decanter in your luggage, the letter accusing betrayal, the key in the cellar, all planted to frame you. Your affair with the Baroness, though real, was irrelevant to her death. Hastings, ever loyal, leaned toward Poirot. But the letter, Poirot. If I die, look to those closest. Did she know? Poirot's eyes softened. Oui, mon ami. The Baroness sensed her danger. Her husband, her sister, her lover, all betrayed her in their way. Her wealth, her secrets, her past, they made with a final discovery. A small diary, tucked behind a dining hall panel, in the Baroness's handwriting. Its last entry, dated the day of her death, read, I fear Rupert and Lydia conspire. If I fall, let justice find them. Poirot's heart sank, a rare flicker of sorrow crossing his face. She knew, he murmured. Her strength was her undoing. She challenged her enemies, and they struck. The will, examined further, revealed a twist. The charity clause was void if the Baroness's death was proven murder, ensuring the estate passed to the Baron, unless he was convicted. A clever trap, Poirot said, but too late for her. The vineyards, the source of her wealth, would now face scrutiny, their history of suspicious deaths, a shadow over her legacy. As the morning sun climbed higher, Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the manor's terrace, the air crisp with autumn's bite. The gardens, where Geoffrey's body had been found, stretched before them, serene yet haunting. It's over, Poirot, Hastings said, his voice heavy. But it feels so empty. All that scheming. For what? Poirot's gaze was distant, fixed on the horizon. For nothing, mon ami. Greed and vengeance, they are eternal poisons, consuming those who wield them. The Baroness, she was no saint, but her death reveals the frailty of the human soul. Thorne, released from suspicion, prepared to leave, his face a mask of relief and guilt. I should have spoken sooner, he told Poirot, his voice low. Maybe I could have saved her. Poirot shook his head. Non, monsieur. The die was cast long before. You were but a pawn in their game. Thorne nodded, departing with a haunted look, his future uncertain. Japp joined them, his overcoat slung over his arm. You did it again, Poirot, he said, a grudging respect in his tone. But I'll never get used to your theatrics. Poirot smiled faintly. The little gray cells, Inspector. They require a stage to shine. Japp chuckled, heading to his car, already planning his report. Poirot lingered, his eyes tracing the manor's facade. This place, he said to Hastings, it holds the echoes of betrayal.